G'day guys, welcome back to New Dollarton. In the last episode, we worked on the skyline of the city, and you could say that this is the iconic part of the city. This is what the city is known for. And that's definitely true at first glance. However, I reckon what we're building today is going to be the true identity of New Dimesburg. And it's really nothing flash. It's nothing like a university or anything to do with tourism. It's not a beautiful waterfront. It's not some beautiful icon. It's kind of the opposite. It's hidden. It's forgotten about. It's been paved over and turned into parkland. It still exists between industrial zones and underneath highways and influencing every part of the city's development. It is, of course, the old industrial train line that stretches all throughout this city. Something I keep on referencing and talking about because this is such an important part of this city, and it is in shambles, it is a mess, and it is outdated because we now have a whole bunch of mods and a whole bunch of new techniques and ways of making this thing look truly awesome. So if you've been hanging out for a detailing episode, this one is definitely going to be it. Even though we probably should be focusing on that budget, she is absolutely struggling down there, but I think that it's more important to capture the identity of the city, and I think that this is probably more important than anything else at this stage. So that's what we're going to be doing. The first thing I wanted to do was delete all this old detail work, which is looking very outdated now, which is always really funny to come back to and see just how much my technique and skills have changed over the months that we've been working on this game. And it's kind of crazy to think that at some point, all of New Dimesburg is going to be in the same situation, but you know what? That's a story for a whole other day. Now, this little neighborhood up here is pretty interesting. I wanted it to be kind of representing this area of Jersey City, which kind of sits on its own little island that's between a whole bunch of train line, and I really love this, and I never really kind of captured it how I wanted it to be looking like. So now that we've got Plop the Growables and now a whole bunch of other detailing options, I figured we could probably do a lot better in terms of how this looks. Now, the true hero here is Plop the Growables. Being able to choose the type of growable building you want in a neighborhood is just so important. It makes a massive difference. I won't be doing this for all the neighborhoods, but for the ones that stand out from the others, I think that this works really well. So around in the neighborhood, I am placing down a whole bunch of trees. I am sinking them into the ground, some of these larger ones, so that they create just little bushes that just kind of cover up a little bit of the cliff face. It's kind of tricky to be placing down trees in this game, and I'll be talking a little bit more about this in a little bit later on in the video, but I always find it kind of hard to kind of separate the difference between just super overgrown, just a wild jungle, and then just trying to create trees that exist within the city, because these places do have quite a lot of foliage, but it's kind of hard. I don't know why, but it's a bit of a tricky thing to figure out. And with that, it was time to start getting into the detail work. And when it comes to detailing in this game, I love the fact that it is pretty bare bones and really simple. I really like the fact that I am pretty much just using the surfaces and some fence networks and a couple of decals and calling it a day, because that is like my favorite type of detailing. I know people like to say that I'm like a detailing City Skylines player, and I guess I am a little bit, but to be honest, my whole city doesn't look like this. It's only certain parts, the parts that are the ones that stand out, the ones that you are looking at the most. I think it's important to do this sort of stuff. To be honest, all this area is done pretty simply, and it's all done with just the help of some awesome mods. In fact, all this has been done before the most recent update. I'm not even playing with that update. This was all recorded beforehand. So this is all done with a whole bunch of mods. So big cheers to you guys. And honestly, pretty minimal detail work by my standards. And came together pretty quickly, which is always nice. Can't really say the same about the next part though. Now, because I am going for an abandoned train line, there is a particular look I'm looking for. I want old and rusty and dusty and just dirty and just falling apart. The current situation with the train tracks in this game, they're looking pretty modern and they're looking pretty new. They've got catenaries and they just, in particular, I mean, I've already voiced my opinion about these, but I'm not like a massive fan of these. And I am very much looking forward to getting some custom ones being made when we have Paradox mods and people start creating these assets, because I think that's going to make a massive, massive improvement. But until then, we got what we got. And I did have a crack at getting a bit creative by sinking down a couple of fence networks into the ground with just a little bit poking through, but unfortunately, as soon as you do any sort of terraforming or any movement around it, they just pop back up to the surface, and that's not going to do it. I also tried doing a fence prop, see if that was going to work, and unfortunately that was just going to be way too much hassle. That was not going to work either. So I figured the safest bet was just to stick with the actual train line, and we'll see if we can maybe replace them later on down the track when we get something custom, or maybe there are some extra updates that add some extra bits and pieces that could make them look a little bit more realistic. But I do think by adding a bunch of decals over the top does give a good abandoned look effect. So I am pretty happy with it, and I think that this works fairly well. But there's still a little bit to be desired. For this little area down here, I wanted there to be a bit of a concrete slab left over from whatever industry used to sit in this area. I do think that industry used to sit here, but it was probably some sort of rail yard that was used for any of the freight that was coming in and out of the city. It's all pretty generic, and I am just placing down a whole bunch of random props because, I don't know, I guess maybe they're still using it for storage, or there's still some stuff left over. That's what I'm kind of going for here. I also wanted to make sure that it was connected up to our road network that was down in New Dimesburg. So I am dragging up a road and it goes underneath the train line and all connected up to that industry, so that there is still like a bit of a connection there so that people can drive on in. I do like it when you still see those connections in real life and you can see and imagine how it all used to work. I do like it, so I figured that would work pretty well down here as well. It did make a bit of a mess of the train line that was over the top. I did try to make this into a bridge, but it was just a little bit too small to make that network and that little segment into a bridge. Plus, that bridge just wasn't really quite right. So I figured I could try and make my own custom one. And at first, I really didn't see how this was going to work out, but it actually turned out pretty great. I did create some custom fencing that went alongside the train track just to make it look a little bit more like a little bridge that stretched across it. And to be honest, it's builds like this where I don't really know if the outcome is really going to be exactly what I want it to be like. You know, I always imagine that there's going to be some sort of small bridge here, and in City Skylines 1, I'd feel pretty confident in my ability to make something like this. I knew what techniques I could use or what even assets I could use. But in City Skylines 2, I don't actually really know. So it's a lot of trial and error, even with that, making that train network from fences. That didn't work. And that was a couple of hours of me just doing a lot of trial and error. So it's kind of fun having to rediscover how to make certain things. And that's kind of like the challenge for me. I know that we just got the economy update that has just created a bunch of challenge for the mechanics of this game and trying to juggle the financial situation of your cities. But for me, I think that the real challenge and the real fun really comes from trying to make realistic places and also trying to make what you have in your head, the vision, and see if it actually works in this game. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And speaking of which, on the other side of the rail yard, I wanted there to be some sort of retaining wall because we do have this road, and I felt like it would be kind of cool to have like a dirty, overgrown and graffitied retaining wall. And I mean, I had no idea how you could even create something like that. So again, a whole bunch of trial and error. This worked pretty well at creating this wall, but I don't think it was really what I envisioned. I wanted it to have a bit of a slope down and also to have a little bit more grittiness to it. This thing was just looking a little bit too squeaky clean. So I came up with the idea to use the surface tool to actually create that sloped area as part of the retaining wall, and paired with the wall that came with the extended roads tool and actually being able to make it alongside that road. This worked out pretty well. I was also able to slap down a couple of decals on it, as well as some little bushes kind of just poking through as well. I've also added in some creeper vines creeping up the side of this retaining wall, which I think is something that just adds in so much to an area like this. And with all these trees around here and all the trees up top on this old abandoned train line, I feel like this is truly coming together. And I feel like this is the sort of area that I would really love to be the focal point of the city, because modern day New Dimesburg, with its new skyscrapers and financial district and just bustling suburbs that are now becoming all nice and new and modern and all the industry being pushed out. But, you know, back in the day, this place was founded by old rail, and that is like its true identity. This old rail line, all the old industry that used to sit around here, all this old industry that is now being converted into modern condos and art spaces. I actually would really like New Dimesburg to more reflect old industry, but then also a little bit of new industry. I think that this is a place that is going to be the focal point of industry, and what better way to have a nod to that than all this old train line that stretches throughout the city that I think it's kind of nice to be poking through in between the cracks and underneath the highways. And when we have more cities and more places in New Dollarton, this entire map, I would like New Dimesburg to reflect industry. That's what I want this area to be like. So that is kind of like why I've made it the focal point of this whole city. And I kind of like to continue doing the same type of focal points for the rest of the cities that we create, but of course with their own identities and their own special characteristics. But I think that's about it for this time lapse. We should dive into a live play, and I'll give you a little bit more of a tour of all the things that we've just built. Man, look at how bustling this area is. Yes, I have paired it up with a cargo train just rolling over that bridge. But far out, it is super bustling. I love it. With all these roads and cars and trains and just the multiple layers of everything. It's just so much fun. This is exactly what I wanted. Just multiple layers, lots and lots of stuff going on. This is great. So I'm going to give you a little tour, and then we're going to get back to work because there are still quite a few things that I want to chip away at. I've also been a little bit busy off camera, so I'll show you some stuff too. But first of all, let's just have a little gander. Actually, what time is it? Yeah, 9 o'clock. So that's why we are seeing a huge amount of traffic. Plus these guys are just bumper to bumper, which sometimes I don't mind because it does kind of increase traffic and make things look a little bit more busy. But I'd hate to be these guys stuck behind this guy trying to navigate around this. Yeah, it's a little bit chaotic, but we like it like that, don't we? Oh, that's a thumbnail right there. But what I love about an area like this is that this is a sort of area that you wouldn't even really knew existed until you hit the highway and you went on this elevated section, or I don't know, maybe if you're in a helicopter or something, and then you'd actually realize that all of this section, this whole giant section of the city actually looks like this. Whereas I think if you were visiting the city, you would of course know it for its skyline or its attractions or the places that you were visiting for. But this is the true identity of the city down here. This is what it's all about. And this whole abandoned train line, this is what this whole city is about. It's about its old industrial past and all this network of train line that connected it all up. And to be honest, I don't even know how much longer an area like this would sit within a city, just vacant and totally waiting for something much better. Am I going to redevelop this area? Absolutely not. I did originally have intention to build something up here and totally repurpose it. This is actually going to be where the tram depot was going to sit, but I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I like it the way it is. I think I might repurpose a tiny weeny bit of it, but for the most part, I'm going to keep it. But I'm not doing a very good job at giving you a tour, am I? So I'm just going to do a little fly around just so we can see some of the little bits of detail. And I'm so tempted to add just something a little bit extra down here, but I don't know. I sort of feel like I need just to take it down a notch and just let it be as it is. I am still really struggling with these networks and trying to figure out how to make that transition because I still think that I might be going a bit too heavy on the decals. And what do you think about this guy down here? I like him. It really does look like a person, doesn't it? 2 eyes, a little nose. And I was also going to remove these catenaries, but I think I'm just gonna leave them because they're not that bad. They do kind of look a bit randomly placed, but also I think it's all right. Or maybe it's not. What do you reckon? But let's have a little fly around here because I actually built this a while back. I actually built it in the last episode, but I just tried to keep it off camera. I don't know if you picked up on it. Nobody said anything, so I guess nobody really picked up on it, but fire out. I love Plop the Growables because you can really get into the detail work much, much better because you actually know how these buildings are going to stay. And, you know, buildings don't really disappear that much. So, yeah, of course they do become abandoned sometimes, but I haven't noticed much abandonment within the city. I do think that it's probably because we have such high demand for houses at the moment. Last time I checked, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people down here because I did demolish their houses. So it wouldn't be a bad idea if I focused on expanding out some of our residential areas in the next episode. We'll see what takes my fancy, I guess, but I should probably focus on that. Definitely a fun little spot to live. I mean, right up close to the city, right up close to a couple of train lines. I mean, I'd love it. But I mentioned before that I love the layers going on within the city. And I think that's just one of the benefits of having just a topography that is a little bit more interesting. We do have this plateau up here, but not just that, I feel like the city kind of trickles down and is really nicely layered, not just with the contours of the land, but then also with elevated highways and just elevated networks in general, because we've also got a little bit of elevated rail lines too. So I just think that creating different layers like that really adds to the feel of your city and just makes it that little bit more interesting too. That's why I never really like building anything on completely flat land. And then if you don't, I do think that it's important to create these elevated highways. I think that's why I enjoy making them so much. And then this retaining wall, I mean, what do you think about it? I think it worked out pretty well. I mean, I obviously can't wait until we start getting some custom ones, but I do feel like half the fun sometimes is trying to make things work with the limitations of the game. But I have been doing a few little things off camera, and so the things that I've been doing is creating these custom pillars, and unfortunately it's a little bit more complicated than I expected. First of all, do you like this? How cool is that? You can imagine people just like jumping up here and doing a little bit of graffiti. So that's why just this one is graffitied up, because it sort of feels like the sort of area that is kind of prone to getting a bit of graffiti. But one of the reasons why I wanted to do this stacked elevated highway is I love it when you have these pillars that kind of share the same supports, and it kind of threads the, well, I just was having a little look, making sure that it actually has enough clearance, just enough clearance with that truck. But yeah, I kind of like it how it threads that pillar section, and I wanted to continue that for a good section of the highway. We don't really need to do it around here, but I'm also half tempted just to do it purely for the aesthetics. But of course, it has no, maybe it does have a purpose, I don't know. What do you guys reckon? Should we continue that support structure kind of like this? Let's do one more and I'll show you why it's so annoying to do. So what I've been doing is I've been removing these supports by just selecting the sub element. By the way, I feel like this is so insane that we can do this. So I use Better Bulldozer to do that, but the annoying thing is that if I was to grab any of these nodes and drag them up or move them around, then they would return. So I just got to continue to remove them if that happens, but that's not even the truly annoying part. First of all, let's select this support that we want to use, and I'm going to lock him in place, and then I'm going to raise him up and try and find the best spot. I can't really use Move It for this, because if I was to use Move It, then it wouldn't lock in place. So I do have to find the perfect height using this. And in fact, I might just do a couple of these. And now that these are roughly in place, I'm going to grab a vertical pillar. I'm using the train one here. This is, I prefer the rectangle. I don't know why, it just makes it a little bit more interesting and a bit different to what the other ones look like. And that was actually kind of easy. kind of a bad example of showing you how hard it was. Okay, this is why it's hard. I'm going to show you with this one, where I want to be creating the same thing. So this is where it gets hard. It works on this side. You know, I can actually line him up, but I need to find a better spot for this because the pillar is going to be in the middle of the road. So what I should do is I will place him there and we will try to line these guys up to this pillar. But I reckon we could probably find a better spot because that will be clipping through that road there. And here's the thing, I can't use move it to move him. Instead, I've got to use these coordinates, which again, so cool that this exists, but it is annoying because it's kind of fiddly. But you know what? That is not too bad right there. All right, it wasn't that bad, but it's a bit fiddly and there's a lot to do and I feel like I've done the easiest ones. All through here is going to be kind of complicated. But I'm going to hold off on doing this because I am still working on some of these nodes. I have improved a bunch of them just by using Move It and getting really nice and close and just making sure they're nice and even. But I am trying to go through and just fix up some of these squiggly lines and whoa! I don't want you to do that. I think I might need some sort of traffic mod because I think I need to align up some of these lanes a little bit better. But I do like this. But what do you think? Do we continue this same theme all along here? It's a little hard to justify, but then I also just kind of like it. It's interesting. But what do you reckon? I have to admit, I just don't really know what to do here, and I feel like it's a bit of a losing battle. I'm just trying to find a realistic way to just make it so that it's not such a sheer change between this and this. I mean, it's not good. It's one of my biggest complaints. Do I say that every episode? Yes. But I do have a few big complaints. And far out, I just wish that was a little bit different. So I'm trying to do something to make it just a little bit less abrupt and a little bit more realistic, but I just also feel like that at some point, this won't even be a thing. We're either gonna get some sort of custom assets and asset creators will probably create something a lot better than that transition, or there's gonna be an update and it's gonna be completely different, or we're gonna get some sort of different track. So I reckon I'm just going to, like, this is me with my hands up in the air going, just leave it. Just leave it. I think it's fine. If I continue doing these decals, then I pretty much got to do the whole entire section. So I'm just going to stop at that bridge and reevaluate and just think about how we can improve all of it. So I'm going to leave it. Walk away, Toodles. Walk away. We need to work on this bit. Clearance is hard, but I think it's worth it because if you get it right and everything is cleared, everything is good, then you can pretty much go ahead and get into more of the detailed stuff. I feel like it's important. If you don't do it right the first time, then you get all sorts of weird stuff. But I've just made sure that all this has very good clearance, and I also think that it's at a pretty good gradient. Nothing's too steep, nothing's too crazy for trains to get up. And unfortunately, by moving all these nodes, now all my catenaries have returned. So that's kind of annoying because I did put in a whole bunch of custom ones. So yeah, they're all back there, but that's fine. And a whole bunch of this line is going to be abandoned anyway. But I do like to go through and make sure that it's all cleared just for funsies. But this whole section over here, so this is all abandoned, and I wanted to make sure that this is aligning up to this because there used to be a bridge stretching across, so I might just fix him up a little bit more. That's a bit better. But this is going to be a little bit of a tricky section to work with. I do think that we have enough room up here for a couple of houses. So let's just smooth him out a little bit. I actually kind of like this sheer cliff thing going on. So I might actually lean into that a bit more and we'll make that a bit more prominent. I mean, this is just becoming my default when it comes to creating these abandoned lines, just adding some dirt decals. Maybe just a couple of smaller little bushes just hiding underneath these little sections. And then down here, I think we need some sort of concreted area just to kind of break away from all this nature. Otherwise, it might get a little bit too wild. I think it's always important to show where people once accessed this area, and maybe they still do. So we'll add a bit of connection there, but I'm not really going to make a road. It's just going to be for pretensies. Oopsies, I got carried away. Yeah, this is what I ended up building down here. We've got a bit of detail now, but I did try to keep some open spaces because I think it's kind of important in areas like this. But let me just show you a couple of things that I've done. We've got some Jersey barriers to stop people from wandering in or at least driving into our abandoned train line. But of course, some people have set up some homes around here too, just to kind of, you know, show that we do have a bit of a housing crisis at the moment. We truly do. So that's kind of our current situation in New Dimesburg. We've also got some bits of rubble and some train carriages down here, or some hoppers. I wish I could add some decals to the side of this, some graffiti bits and pieces, but they do not stick. I'm sure later down the track in City Skylines, we are going to have some sort of option to do so, but for now we don't, and that's all right. They look kind of cool where they are. But I've also just added in just big chunks of rubble around here, as if it's kind of been, you know, people have kind of been just dumping industrial waste around here, and now they've like put that there to stop people from doing that. So that's kind of been the theme for that little section, and I try to keep it pretty bare bones around there too. And then I've also just toned down some of the trees around here. Even though it should be pretty wild, I think that, I don't know, I have a bit of a hard time in this game where I find that if I add too many trees, it becomes like a wilderness. But then if I don't add enough, it just feels a bit barren. But I think that that's probably a good amount. I've also, where I've removed some trees, just sunk in some bushes so that they are nice and nestled into the ground. And I think that it works in areas like that where it kind of trickles down and shows a bit more of the cliffside. I've also added in a bit of a park too. And I've also added in some fences because this is a pretty detailed area. I wanted to make sure that it is reflecting that. Whereas I'm not going to do that amount of detail in all parts of the city. You know, for instance, that is just a little concrete section. I'll probably add a couple of decals down there and I will call that a day. And with all of that down there, I'm now going to point my camera to the skyline because I did love this angle before, but now with all that detail down there, it's looking pretty good. Give me some clouds. Oh man, how good is it looking down here? All that detail, all the traffic just driving around, the busyness, I love it. But alright guys, that is it for today's episode. I'm going to call it, this was a nice detailing episode, but next week I feel like we need to just go big. We need to do something that just makes a giant giant change within the city, or maybe even on the map. I've got a bit of an idea, and I think you're gonna like it. It's a pretty drastic and dramatic change, and I think it's gonna be a lot of fun when we start building on the city, building the rest of the area with all of this big change that we make in the next one. But hey, that's the next one. Guys, thank you for watching this one. And a big old thanks to my patrons over on Patreon, supporting the channel and making videos like this possible. Nadelcho, Nedelchev, Mikey, Moiti, ooh, I'm loving these names so far. Spencer Hitchings, Waterhouse, Matthew Harrison, Eckart's Ladder, Ricardo Scaparo, Alex Calvert, Matt Kelm, Andrew Blumen, and Joe Rose. Cheers, legends. See you all in the next one.